Hi, Brendan.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Thanks, Michaela.
Yeah, of course. What brings you into it?
So, um, this is kind of a weird thing, and it started when I was in about, I think, fourth grade was the first time. But basically, we were reading, I think it was about like, I forget which came first. We were reading about this like dog book where the dog dies, of course, because they always die. And the second one was Aztec Sacrifice. And they were like a couple months apart, and I blacked out both times. And it was the weirdest experience because as a fourth grader, like you're very socially aware.
Mhm.
And so the first time it happened, it was no big deal. But the second time it happened, there was like a very big feeling of loss of control
Mhm.
because like couldn't even have the control to keep my body upright. And I think I like fell on someone, and that was embarrassing. So that kind of continued. It like fed into anxiety, and then as school went on, the next like basically the rest of school, honestly, I was just like, oh my gosh, when is it going to happen next? Where I just lose control and pass out.
Mhm.
And it actually, the funny thing is, it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy because up to that point, I'd never had that happen, and after that, it happened several more times. And so it got to the point where anytime I started feeling lightheaded, I'd like psych myself out to the point where I had to leave the room because I'm like, I'm gonna black out and it's gonna be embarrassing.
Mhm.
And like it would be random stuff, but basically I convinced myself it was like anything shocking or traumatic. And so it was like we'd be in an anatomy class and we'd be like, okay, we're gonna watch a surgery today. And I'd be like, oh, I have to leave the room. And then I like slowly worked through it to the point where at the end of high school, I was like fine
Mhm.
because I thought I was gonna be a doctor. And so I was like desensitizing myself, I guess you could say. And it was like the shock factor was gone because I'd watch like surgeries online to like be like, oh no, I'm gonna like prepare for this so that I'm ready when I do get to medical school in 4 years because I was like planning that far ahead for some reason. I would be like ready and I'd be like, I'm not gonna be the person who faints when we do cadavers and stuff. But
Mhm.
then obviously I went to this, so I started like getting off of that desensitization track, and it was like it relapsed in college, which was really weird. And it would be really weird stuff that would just trigger this feeling of like gonna black out and kind of helplessness.
Mhm.
And so that just causes a lot of like stress. I'd say some shame too. So I guess I'd like to explore that, kind of see like a fresh opinion on those events and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, from an early age, you recognize stressful experiences or stories, things you've witnessed cause you a lot of, distress to the point of
Yeah.
where it physically makes you lose consciousness.
Yeah, and that's the point. It's like I can be in something like I was in the gym and my friend broke his leg in a basketball game
Mhm.
and it was pretty bad. I wasn't like right next to him, but I was fine.
Okay.
It's like the idea of it psychs me out enough where I'm just like, oh, I can't do this. And it's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the shock factor more and the not being prepared for it that just totally catches me.
Okay.
And yeah, triggers that like, oh, something's gonna happen and I can't control it.
Yeah.
And just helplessness and then yeah, anxiety from that.
Gotcha. Okay, so like you said, the shock factors, being prepared for the event is
Yeah.
helpful for you.
Yeah, so what I would actually do in middle school after I started thinking, okay, maybe it's I'm getting shocked and that's what's causing it.
Mm.
So from like fifth grade all the way on, I would read if we were reading like a book and I was like, I don't know if this book's gonna have anything in it. I would read the entire book as we read aloud in class. So my class would be on page like 20 and I'd be on page like 80 something. And then when it was my turn to read, I just flip back, read for like two paragraphs, what they have you do in middle school, and I'd be like, okay, let's find if anything. It was like an obsession to be prepared so that I wasn't caught off guard.
Okay.
So I feel like that would probably explain a lot of the anxiety too. Just feeling like you have to be constantly ready isn't a very good way to be.
Well, you talked about even for in preparation for your future,
Mhm.
for what you were going to do for school, you would desensitize yourself, almost put yourself through your own treatment for
Yeah.
this shock of like, I would rather, you know, if maybe in your words you didn't say this, but rather be caught, I'd rather be caught dead or I wouldn't be caught dead. I don't know what I'm trying to
Yeah, I think
say.
like yeah, I like just don't want that to happen. It's worst case scenario to
Right,
like black out in front of people.
right.
Yeah.
So you're gonna do whatever it takes, essentially, reading ahead in your book, watching videos online to avoid any surprise scenarios that might come up.
Yeah, like at one point in school, actually, like this was really early, like the same year it happened like 2 times within a couple months, and I was like not sure what was happening. I was like actually so anxious. My family like let me stay home for like a month of school, and then they kind of tricked me back into it, which was good for me. I didn't think so at the time, but they got me back on the condition that if I felt like I had to step out of the room, I could just like raise my hand and the teacher would just kind of let me go. And so I was able to avoid it a lot, like those first few years until I really started forcing myself to kind of just deal with it. And it's like such a kind of honestly like embarrassing thing, just like to feel like, I guess that goes back to like the shame aspect that like when it first happened. Um, yeah, it was just a lot of like feeling helpless and kind of like exposed too, because like being like completely unconscious. Well, the one time it happened, it was kind of funny in retrospect. I like left the room because I wasn't feeling good, and I think this was the first time it ever happened. And I like got a drink, still wasn't feeling good, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. And I like sort of went back to the room as I was blacking out, and having never blacked out before, I had no idea like, oh, I should sit down, I should like put my head between my knees. And I just opened the door to the classroom, and that's when my vision went out. And the next thing I knew, I was waking up on the floor. Apparently, I had walked in, slammed my head on the desk as my knees just gave out right after. And everyone was like, thought I was joking at first, and they were like, "Oh, he's not getting up. What happened?"
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's like it's funny in retrospect, but probably was kind of embarrassing at the time. I was kind of too weirded out by what happened to be that embarrassed, as I remember. But yeah, the other time it was definitely a lot more embarrassing. Just like the aftermath, because I was like so shaken up by like, why is this happening again?
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned there was a brief period where it didn't happen for a while, and then you said all of a sudden in college it came back up for you again. Tell me a little bit more about what if that was your most recent experience, what that was like for you coming
Like when
back.
it came, oh yeah. It kind of made me angry, honestly, because I thought I had like fixed that, and then we were just reading something one day in class, and I just kind of like triggered me because the professor, like, I was like, oh yeah, whatever, we're reading this, and the professor like came up with like some little anecdote, and I was like, oh, like that kind of came out of left field. And then I was like, oh, I'm not like feeling great, just kind of feeling like that, like warm feeling. Like the room is close and like your vision kind of narrows and you feel like you're getting sweaty and clammy.
Yeah.
And I was like, is this seriously happening? It was kind of like disbelief and then kind of anger. But I was like, okay, whatever, I'm in college, I'm allowed to leave. So I just left to make sure I didn't pass out, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the kind of those beginning feelings of a panic attack and
Yeah.
physically, your heart rate increases, feeling kind of claustrophobic and
Yeah. I've never like thought about it tied to a panic attack too. That's interesting. Because like my breathing never really has been an issue during it. Like there's no like hyperventilation, but there's definitely like obviously your blood pressure drops and then you just hit the deck.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting connection I've never thought about.
Was that the most recent, or when was the most recent time for you?
It's hard to remember. I think it was probably junior year of college, somewhere in there.
Okay.
Yeah. Because senior year of college, I really kind of was like, okay, you just need to get a grip on yourself and fix this. And there was only like one time where it was actually a pretty horrifying story. I like our teacher was just telling us about this prisoner because he worked in a prison for a long time, and he told us a bunch of stories, but this one was like pretty bad. The guy had a lot of issues. So I was like, ooh, I did not enjoy where this is going, and I wasn't feeling any of those yet, really. Like just a little like on edge, and so I was like, and I'm just gonna take off for a minute, and just went and got a drink, and I was fine. Didn't feel like lightheaded or anything. So I think it was like near the end of junior year, like sometime that winter or spring.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It sounds like you've developed some ways as you get older, maybe some self-talk, as well as leaving the room, taking some space, going on a walk to help take care of yourself and, catch it before it gets unexpected, as you were saying. I want to try something new with you today.
Okay.
It's called the push button technique. And just as a fair warning, it might be a little bit activating for you in some ways, in terms of putting yourself in these feelings and picturing certain sensations in your body. But I think it can help you have another tool in your tool belt for when these feelings do come up, if they do come up again in your future, for how to mitigate or decrease those feelings of loss of consciousness or helplessness or
Mhm.
feelings of dread as you've described. Is that okay
Yeah,
with
no,
you?
that sounds really good because like you connected the two, like the helplessness is directly connected to like that anxiety about losing consciousness.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, if you could just sit up straight with me and put one hand on one thigh and the other on the other. And I just want you to picture when it could be the last time or maybe the most fresh in your mind of when you've had this experience and what you've been feeling. You've shared a couple instances with me already, but in your head, just in your mind's eye, picture yourself in those shoes and just think about the feelings and the sensations that that experience brings up for you. What you're thinking, what's being talked about, what you're seeing, how
Mhm.
your physical body is feeling. I mean, you talked about vision narrowing,
Yeah.
things getting dark.
Do you want me to like share those right now or
Yeah,
just
if you
okay?
could, if you
Yeah.
just take a few, maybe like 10 more seconds to put yourself there and then describe how you're feeling. What's going on for you right now?
It's interesting because a lot of it's the stuff I've described, but I
Mhm,
notice like I feel like the first couple things I notice, I feel like a tingling, almost like numbness kind of in my extremities.
mhm,
And it's like there's some change going on
yeah,
physically. And then the second thing is like it almost feels like a fight or flight response has been activated.
okay, got you.
And I'm just like hyper aware but can't focus on any one thing. Like I'm in like a scanning
Yeah,
mindset, like, oh, find the threat, but there's no threat to be found.
got you.
And then just like physically, like that's accompanied by a tenseness, just kind of like the readiness to move once the threat is found.
Got you. Yeah,
And yeah, that's those were like the big things I noticed. And then there's almost like a feeling of unbalancedness, just like, oh, like I'm halfway over already
mhm,
in that memory.
got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned feelings of imbalance, physical tension, a lot of fight or flight sensations, hypervigilance, wanting to escape and those sorts of things. So if I gave you a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of stress, 10 being the most stress, 1 being not stressed at all, where would you say that memory puts you?
Um, probably probably between a 4 and a 6.
Okay.
Like definitely more than just normal stress, but nothing unmanageable. Like if I'm able to slow it down and think about it,
Mhm.
it's like you're fine. You're just sitting there kind of
Got
thing.
you. So like a moderate level of stress.
Yeah, probably moderate.
Okay. Now I want to try something else. Same technique, but we're going to think of get out of the stress zone and try to put you in a more the opposite, really. Think of a memory where you felt at peace, where you feel safe, um, and at ease. There isn't that sensation to like flee or run away. You feel most connected with your body and like you're very alive and happy and you're feeling really good.
Okay.
So same thing, just kind of close your eyes and put yourself there. Give it about 10 seconds and let me know what you're feeling.
So it's interesting because I chose a sports memory.
Okay.
And like when talking about the helplessness and like what I felt most in that moment was just like kind of like power, like raw energy kind of thing.
Okay.
And it was just like very much the opposite. Like I said, like hands were tingling. That like I felt like my blood was like pumping like a mile a minute in a good way. Just felt like I could be outside in a blizzard and like still be fine. Just like nothing could physically touch me.
Okay.
And then one thing like with the new memory that I didn't notice in the old memory is like even though I'm in a room with people when that like first memory was, I feel very isolated and alone. But in the second memory, I feel very like surrounded by like teammates and support there.
Got you. So power, more control,
Yep.
feeling of connectedness to almost the same sensations of like tingling in your hands, heart rate increase, or kind of this surge of a physical feeling, but tied to a totally different emotion and sensation, surrounded by people who give you a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
They say that anxiety, if you can change your feeling that you've attached to the sensation that it brings in your body, you can turn it into joy or excitement. The same physical stuff that anxiety brings up, so does excitement, and sort of this preparation for something good. And so kind of the same thing. What I want to encourage you, and probably your homework for next week, is if you sense yourself going into that space of, helplessness, lack of control, lack of consciousness because something stressful is happening to you, I want you to just practice the push button technique that we've done today, where you just kind of sit in a chair or put your hands on your knees, and instead of pushing that negative emotion that puts you right back in that space that you're probably more familiar with when you're feeling these sensations, I want you to practice bringing up that sports memory or something similar to that, where you feel that sense of control and power over your emotions. And you can just take a couple deep breaths, take 20 seconds, put yourself there, and see if you can associate the feelings in your body with the feelings that were positive for you, just so that in those moments you have more control when they come up for you. How does that sound?
Sounds good. Yeah, because I really feel like the difference was assertiveness versus passiveness in those memories.
Sure.
So I like the idea of doing something about it and being assertive.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela.
Of course, yeah, give it a try and let me know what you think next week.
Okay, will do.
Great. Thanks. That's it.
Okay, sure.
All right. Yeah, now we're gonna give feedback. Yeah. Dr. Kremeyer is watching. Sorry. You can go first as the client.
Okay. Yeah, as the client, I felt really good. I felt heard, and summarizing was really good near the middle, or I guess it was closer to the end where you summarized like the big ideas of like the negative experiences, like lack of control and all that stuff. Like you really hit that on the head. And then yeah, I felt like you empathized really well, which helped like mitigate the shame that was like associated with it. So that was really nice as a client. And I like the way you did the push button technique too. That was a good choice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think the idea of it went well. I think you chose the topic that fit well with the push button technique in some ways. So I'm happy about like giving it a good college try. You know what I mean? Like I came in and I threw segues and sort of let you describe your experience and listen to it, and then segued into the Adlerian technique, which was interesting. So I'm glad that went sort of well. I wish I had asked you more open-ended questions about your experience. I think it was a lot of reflecting and summarizing, which is good, but I do wish I had maybe slowed down a little bit and asked you more questions.
Yeah, if we had a full session, that would have been nice.
Yeah.
But in 15 minutes,
yeah,
it's hard.
Yeah, that was the other thing. I think I
Yeah.
lost track of time a little bit at the end. So I to be honest with you, I was thinking so hard, kind of stressing about how I was gonna get to the push button, that it was hard for me to focus sometimes on like what you were actually saying.
I couldn't really tell. If that
Okay.
helps.
That
It felt like you were engaged.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. I felt that way sometimes, so I apologize.
It's okay.
But yeah, and then silence. I mean, that's probably always consistently going to be some feedback for me, but I'm always trying to work on taking a beat, slowing down. And I caught myself speeding up to the point where like I didn't know what I was trying to say, or like I was kind of grasping for the right word or whatever. So silence and slowing my pace, I think would be good.
Cool.
Cool.
Good session.
Thanks.
Michaela. Oh, do you ever
Pleasure.
do you ever say the orientation, by the way?
Oh, I was trying to practice Alfred Adler's theory, specifically the push button technique. Okay, sorry.
It was good.
Thanks. Bye.